Hi, everybody. Welcome to All Things Metaphysical podcast with Kellie and Gail. This is episode 50.
Yay.
Hey, if you are watching us live, please feel free to comment or ask questions in the comments section, and we will do our best to answer them while we are live. You can always reach out to either one of us afterwards and ask us questions, and we'll talk about them in the following week. Please also like and subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends if you find it interesting.
Please.
Other people will probably find it interesting. Today we were talking about how to deal with frustration when it comes up on the metaphysical path. Because you get all these messages about being metaphysical and you shouldn't have anger, you shouldn't be this, you always have to be in joy, you always have to be in gratitude. Well, let's be honest, that doesn't always happen.
Well, that isn't true either because if you don't have both a negative and a positive, you're not a whole person. As much as we like to be, of love and light,
Hmm.
um, life doesn't work that way.
And you also have to have some piss and vinegar.
Yes. Well, you would never appreciate a sunny day
Hmm.
without the rain. And that's just the way it is. It's just, there's always opposites. That's how the universe works. We wouldn't have a universe if it wasn't for opposites.
Hmm.
um it's I think it's better to let it out and be angry and feel the anger and then work through it and let it go than it is to never allow yourself to express it.
Hmm.
And I think that's what a lot of people do. And it just, it builds and builds and builds. And honestly, I think that's a contributing factor to heart disease. That's personal opinion. With people I have known who have had heart disease and heart attacks, they are those people who are always very stoic and don't show any emotions. So not showing your emotions is actually very bad for you
Hmm.
physically. My thing is I usually will take as much as I can take, and then um, someone a long time ago, I had a recording studio.
Hmm.
Someone a long time ago made me a T-shirt that said, "Warning: content subject to sudden explosion." And because that's the way I ran the studio,
Uh-huh.
it was, I was hovering over everyone that worked there. And
Hmm.
that was a real learning experience because that was absolutely true. And I had to learn to let other people have some responsibility. And at that point in my life, that was very difficult for me because of my childhood and, a very, very abusive relationship.
Hmm.
So when you're an abused person or an abused child, you tend to have a tendency to control. You want to control everything. And that was really something I had to work through with that particular business. So now I usually, if something is irritating me, I out with it right away.
Hmm.
And what has gotten me lately is people not doing what they say they're going to do.
Hmm.
And it has really dire consequences for different animals, and that is my heart and soul, is taking care of these animals. So if I tell you I've got a pen that's flooding, can you come, and you say I'll be there in an hour, and you don't show up for 3 days, I'm going to yell at you.
Hmm.
And I think that's a better way of handling it than stuffing it inside, making yourself sick.
Hmm.
Just what I've gone through.
So we have a couple viewers, and one said, "Good evening from Indianapolis." Good evening back, Indianapolis. Let us know if you have any questions, things that make you go, hmm. I
Um,
was thinking about too, not only, dealing with frustrations in your life, but like when you're on the medical physical, let me try that again. When you're on the metaphysical path and you definitely like are in flow and things are happening and things are moving, and all of a sudden it stops and you get really frustrated because it's like, well, what did I do? Why did it stop? And why can't I get it going again? And so I think that can cause a lot of people to have a lot of feelings as well.
Well, and I think they're all connected. You
Mhm.
know, when we're on a metaphysical path, if things all of a sudden stop progressing as you would like them to, take a look at what's going on around you. You
Mhm.
know, are you frustrated with someone? Is there anger somewhere? Is someone trying to energetically sabotage you in some way? Because all of those things are happening right now in the world around us.
Mhm.
And if you are even the slightest bit empathic, you feel that.
Mhm.
And that, especially for people who don't realize that they're empathic and they don't realize what they're picking up on. And all of a sudden they're just out of sorts and they're like, what is happening right now? And I know so many people like that.
Mhm.
So it's sort of, you have to look at it as a whole sometimes to figure out what's the tiniest little piece that's going on.
You know, it's funny because when I was practicing more as a therapist, somehow I always got the clients in the place that I worked who were sort of on the metaphysical path, but we couldn't really talk about it where I was. So I used to spend time in every session teaching them how to protect their own energy field. Because even if they weren't on the path or weren't empathic, I think that's just something really important to learn how to do because we all get gut reactions. We all have those feelings
Yep.
to different degrees in certain situations. Like I can walk in a room. I'll never forget this. When I was getting married, my mother's like, "What's the house look like that your in-laws live in?" I said, "I don't know, but I could tell you how all of them were feeling while I met them and everything that was going on with them and all the issues that they were having, even though they didn't talk about it."
Yep.
It's just kind of funny what we pay attention to. My mom's like, "That's not what I asked you."
Right, right.
Sorry, I can't explain the rest. It was this big, it had this many bedrooms, and, that was all, you know.
Yeah. Have you ever shook hands with a total stranger and instantly felt everything that they'd gone through that day? Constantly.
I
That
got
happens.
that a lot in airports.
Yes.
When I'd be sitting next to someone waiting to get on a plane, I'm like, "Oh, I've been slimed." Or
Mhm.
I'm on an airplane and, I'm the person sitting next to me, even though I'm watching a movie, have earphones on, decides that they want to talk the whole flight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Total strangers coming up, introducing themselves, telling you their whole life story.
uh-huh.
You know, it's amazing what happens. It really is. Yeah.
So one of our viewers said, "Soulmate journey,
Mhm.
animals help me thrive. I love them absolutely." And someone said, "Just found my 31st feather this morning in 3 weeks." Um,
And that's someone trying to get your attention.
mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
On one of my pages, I posted something about what all the different colors of feathers meant when you find them. So, yeah.
It also depends on where the feather's coming from. You know, I always heard, you know, you want to find the white feathers are the ones that are from your angels or someone who is a guide on the other side. Well, my grandmother was particularly fond of the color red. So I would find red feathers in places where red birds did not exist. And it was just, wow, there's another one. So you kind of have to look at anything that is colors
Uh-huh.
um, with an eye towards what resonates with you. But I want to talk a little bit about the soulmate journey because that is something that I've heard so many people talk about. They want that great soulmate. Well, first off, you may not. A soulmate can be the most difficult relationship you ever have.
Mhm.
A soulmate can be an animal. A
Mhm.
soulmate can be a parent or a child or a sibling or a friend. Um, People have this idea that a soulmate is the most fantastically wonderful romantic relationship, and that's not necessarily the case. It can be, but most of the time, it is not.
Would you say when people are thinking about soulmates in that way, they're really talking more about twin flames?
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think you can have a lot of different soulmates
You
in your
can.
life in
Yeah.
different roles.
At one time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 So,
So,
I just want to preface that there's a difference between having a soulmate and having a twin flame relationship.
right. And what most people are looking for is a twin flame.
Mhm,
And not everyone has one. So, you can look your entire life and find out you don't have one
mhm,
because not everyone is a twin flame. Um, but soulmates are the relationships that will teach you a lot about yourself,
mhm.
whether it is a relationship or a friend or an animal. They will teach you more about yourself than any other 15 relationships. That's kind of how you know in hindsight, oh, hey, that was a soulmate, because they will rip your soul out, completely destroy you, and then you have to rebuild yourself. I have never known
Not always, but that can happen a lot.
that happens a lot. If you're looking for a romantic
Mhm.
soulmate experience, be very careful what you ask for. I've never seen one end well.
So, it also depends on what your belief system is and
Right,
how you go into things,
right.
but I think that some of the people in our lives where we learn the hardest lessons or that we hate the most are our greatest teachers.
Absolutely.
They're playing that role for us to help us work through that level that we need to work through. And, so sometimes I have some difficult relationships in my life. And when it's been a particularly bad day, I'll just say, thank you for reminding me that I need to continue to work on this.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Yep.
It's hard because, unless you've signed in, all we see is Facebook user.
Right, right.
No, we don't know which. I mean, I can track kind of whose conversations go with who, but
Right,
it's just kind of funny because there's this chain now in the comment sections, and all of them say Facebook user.
right.
So it's just kind of funny.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. One thing with overwhelming feelings when you meet people, um, make sure you shield yourself. You can meet someone that is absolutely the worst feeling person. And those seem to be the people that want to talk to me most if I'm out in a gathering or social situation. You have to really shield yourself, or you can pick up some of that, what I call the ickiness of
well,
someone else.
let's also talk about people who still have a lot of their pure pink heart energy, and are kind of a bright light and can emanate unconditional love, are going to pick up what the common term now is energy vampires. You
I
know,
just call them the nasties.
is that you pick up these people who want your light, who want that unconditional love, and they're going to do whatever they need to do to get that
Right,
because they don't know how to ask for it directly. They just know on some level that they want it. They don't even know that they're a lot of times doing it, but they can make your life very difficult at different times.
very, very difficult. Yeah. Twin flame isn't for the faint of heart. No, no, it is not.
Somebody's twin flame lives in South America. Well, you both said America. You didn't say North or South.
That's true. Yeah. I recently spoke to someone from Peru,
Mhm.
and we had a very interesting conversation about everything from extraterrestrials to, Mayan civilization and on and on and on. And his thinking about what's going on in the world is that people got away from themselves.
Mhm.
He says when he looks at people, and he's a shaman, so when he looks at people, he sees the light dim in their hearts. And he says that is the issue. We have, with all the society and all the gimme, gimme, gimmes, and now what are you going to do for me, and all this stuff, the materialism, especially in this country, it's put dampers on our heart chakra as a whole society. And
Mhm.
he said he can walk through a crowded, I met him at a college
Mhm.
event the other night, and he was walking through a crowd of people who didn't even realize he was the speaker,
Mhm.
and they were there to see him. And he was, that one's dead, that one's dead, that one's almost dead, that one's dead, and he was doing this walking through, and I wasn't close enough to hear what he was saying. But when I met him later, I said, what was all this stuff, and he said, you have to see how I see.
Mhm.
And then he looked at me and he went, you do see how I see. And I said, yes, we're those people who are having a heart chakra deficiency. And he says, they're dead. And I was just so taken by how abrupt he was. And in his speech, he talked a little bit about twin flames. He talked a little bit about soulmates. He talked a little bit about a lot of things. But his lesson that he said he wanted people to take away from what he said was
Mhm.
that if you're not living according to your own personal soul, your own personal who you are, your soul print is what he said, then you're killing yourself, not in a physical nature,
Mhm.
but in a moving forward into energy nature. And I thought it was just so interesting that
Mhm.
he wrapped everything into that one thing where, soulmates, twin flames, all of that stuff. If you're not being true to yourself, doesn't matter if you find the right people, you're still not being true to yourself. And
Well, we have a question from one of our listeners. If you want to,
can you leave a soulmate? Oh, hell yes. I'm sorry. Did I say
you said that out loud. Yes.
that? In most soulmate relationships, not all of them, in most, there will be a end to that relationship. It's like you have agreed to connect or reconnect
Mhm.
to learn from each other. And when those lessons are learned, you aren't together anymore. You'll always be connected,
Mhm.
but you don't share a life anymore.
Mhm.
That's normally what happens with soulmates.
Well, and I think it's we're also bringing in kind of the concept of karma and learning lessons and our soul purpose. It's kind of all tied together because when you work through a karmic issue, and oftentimes you can do that with soul. God, the birds outside are really loud right now. Twin flames and soulmates. Once you learn those lessons, as you were just saying, you don't need that person in your life anymore. Sometimes, what's the famous saying? Sometimes people come for a season and sometimes they stay for a lifetime.
Right.
You know, so uh, soul
I
people are the same. I can't even talk today.
I don't know why they're telling me to talk about karmic relationships, but they're telling me to talk about karmic relationships. Um, a karmic relationship is something that you have agreed with another soul or several souls to reincarnate at the same time. And in order to work out things that happened in previous lives,
Mhm.
isn't always unpleasant, but it usually is. It's, when that karmic debt has been paid. In many relationships that I have watched through the years and had through the years, as soon as that karmic debt is paid, it's like everything conspires to move that person out of your life because the karmic debt has been paid.
Mhm.
Now, oftentimes you stay connected,
Mhm.
but in many cases, they're just like gone.
Mhm.
I have relatives that are just, I don't know, I think they're still alive, but it was because that was a karmic relationship. And when we absolutely learned all of our lessons, we there was no more reason to be in that person's life. And I hear from people all the time. I was talking to someone the other day that she just divorced her husband of 50 years. I'm sorry, if you make it to 50, what are you thinking? But for her, it was very, very important that she break away. And she told me over the past 10 years, they had been living two separate lives.
Mhm.
It's like they were close, they were close, they were close. All of a sudden, he's over here, she's over there. They live in different countries at this point. And I said, well, yeah, what are you married to him for? Why didn't you divorce him then? But that's happening more and more and more. I'm hearing more and more people where, long-term relationship, 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years, all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I don't need this anymore. I'm going to go over here. And as sad as that is from a human standpoint, we've been trained as human beings that you're supposed to have one true love. That's supposed to be the person you marry. It's supposed to be the person you have children with. You're going to live your whole life with that person. I think that went out in the 30s. So be careful with karmic relationships. Sometimes they can be soulmates. Most often they're not. It's just somebody that you've agreed to reconnect with to each grow your souls.
Well, it's always interesting when they show up, like in your life too, because they come in for certain lessons, and sometimes you're not, like, you may have crossed paths like 10 years before, but it wasn't the right time. And then you start talking about, like, well, I was there at this time. What do you mean you were there? Because you weren't supposed to meet yet, because it wasn't time to work through the lesson. So it's really fascinating when you start to think about all that and how all of that plays out and what does that really mean, which then leads to the question about free will.
Right. And I do believe that free will can sometimes move us light years ahead of where we would have been. It can also move us way back. For a long time, I had friends that said my middle name should be Scenic Route, because I would start out going this way and I'd go over here and over there and get lost. I mean, I drove from Texas to California in the middle of the night by myself with no map and no idea of where I was going. But that's just who I was. And it's like, okay, you've made me mad. I am leaving. And when I said I was leaving, I left. I wasn't like, I'm leaving, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I was like, no, I'm moving to another state. And that probably held me back for a very long time. But I don't regret it. I may not be where I would have been, but I certainly had a lot of fun. And I learned a lot of different lessons than had I never, jumped. There's a sign in my office that says, jump and the net will appear. And I've kind of lived my life that way.
Yeah, I mean, the quote, I can't remember who said it, is, the leap of faith. If you take that leap of faith, one of two things will happen. You'll either grow wings or you'll have something to land on.
Yeah. I just
taking that leap of faith, that's the hard part, because we all want to know what the outcome is before we do it. And in order to take a true leap of faith, you're not going to know what the outcome is.
Right. And that's kind of the way it is when you meet someone and your soul recognizes them and you're supposed to be with them on some level. You don't really know that. You're feeling that connection. Most likely it's a past life connection, more so than an actual soulmate or twin flame. I think most people have a really deep connection with loves in their past life. But when you meet someone, you don't know what they're going to be. You know your part in it, but you can know someone. You can grow up with them. You can go to school with them. You can know them forever. You're apart for 10 years. They're a completely different person.
The other thing they want us to talk a little bit about too is soul families. Because we all come in being connected. Like, and this freaks people out to no end when you have this conversation, is that we come back with the same groups of people over and over and over again, and we've all been everything together. So like, oh, my husband was my brother in a past. I mean, and it starts freaking people out when you have those conversations. But it's really important, which is why you feel that soulmate connection to a lot of people, because they're part of your soul family. And it's the same people that you've traveled with through many lifetimes.
The thing too is you can have soul families that are still kind of karmic relationships where you travel for a long time and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I don't know who these people are. I'm going over here now. And I've known a lot of people who have had that happen. I lived in San Francisco. We used to do Friendsgiving before it was a thing
Mhm.
because everybody I knew was an outcast from their family. It was very strange. And you kind of choose your new people, but you still have that soul family. You
Mhm.
just kind of outgrow them sometimes.
Yeah, one of our viewers said, I have a huge soul family, and even though we may not be in the same state or country, yeah,
Yeah,
it's just that connection you feel. Like, I've had a friend since eighth grade, and I don't talk to her that often, but she definitely feels like my family versus my friend. And, we just pick up right where we left off.
yeah,
Could be a year that we've talked to each other, it could be, and I think it's really important to just be aware of all those different things and all those different kinds of relationships. One isn't better than the other, they're just different.
yeah, yeah. I know. I may have talked about this before. I was walking, there were people around us. I think my sister, one of my sisters was, anyway, there were a bunch of people, and we were walking through a mall. And my daughter, who was then about 5, she looks up and she says, "Hey, mom, do you remember when I was the mom and you were the little girl?" And everybody just froze. They were totally freaked out. And I was like, "I do remember that. Yep." And we just kept walking. And I turned around and she and I kept walking. Everybody else was back there. It's like all of a sudden they wanted nothing to do with us. And that's kind of what it's like sometimes when you have a soul family where not everyone's on the same page.
Well, and I've told this story before. I think I was 5, so I was between 4 and 6, somewhere in that vicinity. And I told my parents that my grandfather was going to die of a massive heart attack, and then he died 2 weeks later. That didn't go over so well.
You accidentally freak people out a lot when you're on this journey. Yeah.
Yeah, people oftentimes are, and I can tell because you can feel it because you're on this journey. You're already an empath, and you can feel when you're making people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So then sometimes you try and overcompensate, which then makes it worse.
Yeah. And you hear what people are saying behind your back. That was the thing that really has gotten me in a lot of trouble, especially when I was like a teenager,
Mhm.
because I was surrounded by people who probably weren't that good of people, really, honestly. And I would walk past them and I would hear what they were thinking. And I would turn around and answer them. And they just, yeah, you want to be an outcast really quick. Do that.
So, again, I think it's important to be aware that we all have a lot of gifts and abilities and talents. A lot of times, based on what our experiences were in childhood, we shut them off. And I shut my all my gifts off for a good 20 years. And then they came back were I mean, there was no way they weren't coming back,
Right.
but they came back with a vengeance. So I just think it's important, when you have people around you growing up who understand it and can talk about it and support you, you have a very different experience than when you've freaked everyone out and it's like you're afraid to say anything anymore because you know what it's doing to other people.
Right.
That it then starts to shape your world and how you use your gifts and abilities and what that looks like.
Yeah. It's I don't know why they want me to remind people, but it's important to know, apparently, that even though you have people in your soul family and you recognize each other, that doesn't mean they're all at the same level that you're at. Everybody has gifts and talents, but not everyone is aware of them.
Mhm.
So just because they're different doesn't mean they're not your soul family. They still are. And you can sit there all day long and say, "Why did I pick these bunch of losers?" But they're still your soul family. You can't like trade them in and get new ones, although you can choose your family later on.
Do you think, and that they're just keep repeating this in my head, so I'm going to just ask it out loud. Do you think that's why, like in the metaphysical world, they always talk about finding your soul tribe?
Yes.
because
Absolutely.
it's that same connection. Yes, you can go ahead and ask a question. We will do our best to answer it. I'm sorry, but both of us stopped talking.
I know both of us are
Reading
like,
the
what?
comments at the same time. That's kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah. We would love to answer your question, please.
So, and again, I mean, it's always the thing that I find the most interesting about our show every week is we start with generally an idea, and God only knows where we're going to end up by the end of the show.
Sometimes we don't even have an idea. We just go with it.
So the question is, when you shut your gifts down, how did you open them back up? Well, I can share what happened to me is so the grandfather that I told my parents was going to die, I was, like I said, like around 5, and I was actually doing my internship, and I was at in a Catholic hospital at the time, and I was doing my internship in eating disorders, so we were eating lunch, and my grandfather was sitting across from me in the room. So that's kind of when the gifts started to come back. And then I took a class called Opening to Intuition and was on Mr. Toad's Wild Ride for about 2 years after that because they were coming back full force. And, the only thing I will say is to have people to talk to about it because you start to feel like you're crazy with some of the things when they start coming back. Like I have friends who are transport angels. I have transport mediums. I have friends who are mediums. I have friends who are psychic, and each of them experiences things a little bit differently. Some people are angel communicators. Again, we all tune in. So the way that I'm going to explain that is that each of these things is just at a different frequency. And depending on what you resonate with are the gifts and talents you're going to have. For some people, they vibrate at a level that it's more angel communication. For other people, they vibrate more at the level that it's a medium. Some people vibrate at both those levels at the same time, hence transport mediums. So I think it's really important to start to think about who your team is and who's working with you because it'll give you an idea of what frequency you're vibrating at.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. I never really shut mine down. I
Mhm.
tried to ignore them.
Oh, no, I made mine go away.
You did. You did totally. And I probably, had I thought about that, I think I didn't realize I could turn them off at the time. So I just kept it hidden for, a very long time. There were always a select group of people who knew, and I felt like, I was safe with.
Mhm.
But one by one, sure enough, they would turn on me, and it was like the biggest, worst thing in my mind when I was in grade school, especially, that anyone could know about me. And I had a lot of false friends in this lifetime, and they would pretend that they could see people that had crossed over too. And then they would run and scream and tell everyone what a weirdo I was. So I learned to just not tell anyone, just not mention it. And, occasionally somebody would say, "Who are you talking to?" And there's like, 3 angels and Moses in front of me. And I'm like, "These guys? Oh, never mind." Myself, I'm talking to the cat. And it was just like that for a very long time. Um, it just finally, I got to the realization that this is who I am.
Mhm.
And if people didn't like it, well, I decided I wouldn't like them either.
So
And
there's
that
two
was,
things in the comment section. One is I was with my dad when he went down with a massive heart attack in 1974, and I was 14. And so when that happens, there's a reason you're the one who's there with the person
Mhm.
when it happens. That's not by chance. You both agreed to be there at that time. And maybe it's because your dad felt comfortable with you and knew you would be able to handle it, whereas other people in the family might not have been able to handle it. And that's
Right.
actually what he's saying. There was a reason it happened with you and not any of your other siblings or your mother. And then the other comment was, I think when I was young, I kind of suppressed my gifts, talents, and abilities, and I'll not do that anymore. And it really is, if you think about it, everyone in the world is starting to open up a little bit more. Like, no one knew what Reiki was probably like 5 years ago. And now that is the most common word that everyone talks about. The
Right.
same with energy. We've never talked about energy, but now everyone knows what that means. More and more people know what chakras mean. They know what energy healing is. They know what alternative healing is. And it's not the taboo that it used to be. So that shows that people are becoming more and more comfortable with all of it. And now it's just re-indoctrinating ourselves for ourselves to become comfortable with who we are because of all the messages that we got growing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
When I
that's a
was
tough one. I struggled with that well, let's be honest, I still struggle with it from time to time.
Yeah, yeah, from time to time I do too. But how things have changed in just our lifetimes.
Mhm.
It's amazing. I talk to kids all the time and they openly talk about, things like spirits and energy, and they know what it means when you talk to them. And that's amazing to me. That's just awesome. That's the right direction. If we
Mhm.
could drag the rest of the world with us, we'd be cool.
We're getting there. We're getting
I think they've still got us outnumbered at this point.
there. Yeah, so it's funny because I have a lot of people who were like, "Well, if you're struggling, what chance do I ever have to use my gifts?" And I'm like, "I don't know that that's a true statement because what I'm showing you is demonstrating what it really means to use your gifts and that sometimes it can be overwhelming." I know when there's been horrific things that have happened on the earth, and I'll just use this as an example because, it's the one going through my head. When 9/11 happened, it was horrific for me because I felt everything and I saw everything. I didn't even watch the news, but I saw everything that was happening and what was going on and all the feeling. And so sometimes for myself, I don't always like to be grounded because I can then tell when events are going to happen and, sometimes I just don't want to know. Like, I don't want to have to carry that this major thing is going to happen.
Yep.
I'm not that I'm the only one carrying it. There's lots of people carrying it, but sometimes it can be overwhelming to have to carry that and know that there's nothing you can do to stop it. There's might be some things you could do to mitigate it or make it not as bad as it would be. But, sometimes that's a really difficult position to be in.
Yeah, I actually called someone the night before on 9/10, and they worked in the Twin Towers. And I said, "Don't go to work tomorrow." "Well, why?" "Just don't." And the next morning, he got up, he was going to go to work, and he twisted his ankle and couldn't walk. And he called me, he goes, "Oh my God, how did you know?" After the news started, don't ask me, I can't explain it. I just didn't want you in those buildings. And it was just horrifying
Mhm.
to wake up. And I was on the West Coast, so it was very early in the morning. And I woke up just screaming because I knew I could see it. And
You
it
know,
was just horrible.
I'm just going to share this story about when my dad transitioned a couple years ago now. Is that I knew he was going to transition. So, like, I didn't sleep all night because I kept waiting for the phone call to come in. And then at 4:30 in the morning, there was this brilliant light that looked like a sunrise in my room. And I'm like, bye, dad.
Yeah.
And then, sure enough, like 15 minutes later, the phone rang. And it's so funny because I knew it happened. I knew it was going to happen. But when the people gave me the message, I burst out crying. It's like I was waiting for it. I knew it
Right.
was gonna happen, but yet still hearing someone else say those words to you, I don't care how prepared you are.
No,
I don't
you're
care what
never,
your
you're
shoes are,
never prepared.
it's still heart-wrenching.
Yep. Yeah, my grandmother told me, she told me she was going to die. She's like, you know what? This was Thanksgiving Day, and I wasn't there. I was on the West Coast, couldn't get away. And I talked to her and I said, Happy Thanksgiving. And she says, Yeah, happy last Thanksgiving. I'm going to go home. I'm going to get all my Christmas decoration, and I'm not going to wake up in the morning. And I went, what? And her health had been sliding and she'd had some heart issues and we knew it was coming.
Mhm.
But she was just so matter of fact. Yeah, I'm going to get out my Christmas decorations, see what I have one last time. And I'm not going to, I really wish you'd made it for Thanksgiving. I'll be there for Christmas. I won't. And, and that night I woke up in the middle of the night, my grandmother standing at the foot of my bed going, I told you, gotta go now. And when the phone rang in the morning, I answered the phone. I know. They're like, "What do you mean you know?" But my daughter and I, she came to stay both. She came to see both of us, and we both woke up knowing. But it was really funny because it was the first time my new boyfriend had spent the night, and she's at the bottom of my bed going, "Who is that?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm getting grilled by a dead one. What do you want?"
Before my grandmother died, because she was sick, before she died, but the week before she died, she woke me up from a dead sleep and said, "I'm leaving soon.
Yep.
Help everyone else deal with it." So,
Yep.
so we digressed a little bit, like we always
That's
do. Thank
normal.
you guys so much for all your questions and feedback. If anything comes up between now and next week's show and you have questions, you can feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we will go ahead and answer those next week.
Yep.
Thanks for being with us this evening. Again, please subscribe and like our channel on YouTube and share it with your friends if you think that they would
Please.
find it interesting.
Yep.
So
Please.
we will see you guys all again next week. Bye for now.
Bye.